Thank you very much, Ms. Xu and Mr. Shai. I'm Kevin Oates. I'm head of Asia for Marine Money. I've been doing this for a long, long time. What Marine Money does is collect data from shipping sources, shipping finance sources from around the world. We do that from conferences like this. We do that from our magazine, which we issue 4 times per year, and from our newsletter, which we issue every week. We speak to a lot of people, we see a lot of people, we hear a lot of things, and we have a lot of data about ship finance. And that's what I'm going to talk about just for 10 minutes now, about some of the kind of data that we've collected over the years regarding Chinese finance and Chinese leasing. First of all, let's have a look at where China is on the shipping map. We all know, of course, but I mean, just from these two graphs here, we see that in terms of ship owning, China is number 2 in the world in terms of value of the fleet owned. It's a massive investment. I mean, China has a massive fleet of vessels. We all know about where the shipyards stand and all the rest of it. That's the second graph on the right-hand side there. China is the dominant shipbuilding nation in the world. South Korea below that, Japan below that, and that's it. The rest of the world is relatively insignificant in the general sectors of shipping. China stands at number 1. This is how Chinese shipbuilding has grown over the years. We reckon from data that we have, it's about 11% CAGR for 24 years, the last 24 years, since around about 2000. And you can see from the bars, I mean, generally speaking, China is number 1 in bulkers and tankers and in containers. In the higher value vessels, LPG and LNG, up until now, China has not had such a dominant position. But we believe this is now changing as well. And this gives you an idea. I mean, this is the active fleet. The top bar is the active fleet of LNG vessels. And you'll see from about 600 and odd vessels, only 37 of the existing vessels, of the current LNG vessels, were built in China. If you look at the bar below, which are the LNG vessels on order, we can see that 78 out of about 350 or something like that LNG vessels are actually being built in China. So, China is now also expanding its expertise and its shipyard activity into high-tech, high-value vessels. So, we believe, there's no doubt about it, China is going to continue to be a powerhouse in terms of shipbuilding in the years ahead in all sectors of shipping. The Chinese capital markets are also, actively engaged in assisting Chinese shipyards. We have seen mergers of shipyards. We've seen capital raises. We've seen shipyards coming out of mothball situations. So the shipyard and shipbuilding capacity of China is also extremely strong. If we look at finance generally, this is quite an interesting chart. I mean, there's a lot of finance around in the world, not just in China. There's a lot of finance coming out of Europe, from the traditional banks, from non-core banks, from Chinese leasing, from Japan, from all over the place. Shipping is in a strong place. It's doing very well at the moment, and therefore there's a lot of finance chasing shipping. But because the markets have been so strong recently, because ship owners have got such a lot of liquidity, in actual fact, at this moment in time, it's the ship owners who have the kind of upper hand, you could say, in looking for finance. Maybe that's because they don't need so much leverage. I mean, in the past, ship owners were looking for 80% leverage, but now because they have such a lot of liquidity, they might be satisfied with 60% leverage. So what we've seen, and this graph is just an example of a few refinancings or financings, which we've seen over the last few years. In general terms, pricing is reducing because the ship owners can shop around, you could say. They can accept less leverage, they can put in more equity, and pricing on finance in a general terms is coming down. That last one at the bottom with Secor, that's different. That's offshore. And this is the sector where perhaps it's the exception. There's a general dislike of traditional banks to finance offshore because of their ESG principles and policies, and therefore offshore is often forced to look elsewhere for their financing, maybe to non-core financing, also to Chinese leasing. And it's an opportunity perhaps for Chinese leasing to get more involved in the offshore sector. One of the things Marine Money does is we do a finance survey. Every year we invite finance providers to tell us how much, the size of their portfolio, how much they've lent over the last year, and some of their key policies. If you look at the bottom chart, first of all, that's from 2013. Now that's 10 years ago, And what do we have? We have the traditional ship finance banks from Europe in the top positions. So it's DNB, it's HSH, it's Nordea, and people like this. Where are they today? They're not in the same position. And now if you look at 23, which is basically the size of the portfolio of the banks at the 31st of December 2023, as reported to us by these banks, you'll see that a lot of the banks in the top, or finance providers, because they're not all banks, of course, in the top 10 or 15 positions, are now from Asia. And that is a massive switch over the last 10 years or so. We're splitting it into banks on the top, and non-banks on the bottom. And again, there's quite, especially from the non-banks here, number one, we have BOCOM Leasing, we have China Exim Bank, we have CMB Leasing, and so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of you here in the room are now the leaders in terms of global ship financing to the shipping industry, the global shipping industry. This is an interesting one. We always ask in the survey, we ask, how much lending or financing did you do in the previous year? Number one on the list, as you see here for 2023, is BOCOM Leasing. Number 4 or 5 or 6, they're all Europe, they're all Asian. That's the important thing. I mean, the interesting thing. A lot of the financing coming into shipping these days, especially for the bigger projects. Now, in a way, that's understandable because a lot of the business being done today are expensive container vessels, expensive LNG vessels, expensive LPG vessels. And this financing, generally speaking, is coming from Asia. This one just shows you what the banks are doing. The banks is not the banks, the European banks are still trying to lend. They're very busy trying to lend. But I spoke to a banker earlier on this year. I mean, he said, a European banker, head of shipping, he was global head of shipping. He told me that, during the previous year, they had given a record amount of loans. They had given $4 billion of loans, and the portfolio did not grow. And the reason for that is because the shipping market is so strong, and shipping companies are making so much liquidity that they're repaying and prepaying their finance. And that's why they're in such a strong position in terms of being able to get good terms from their finance providers. So what happens? I mean, perhaps less so in China, maybe it's happening here as well, but in the rest of the world, since vessel prices are so high, since financing is so much available, a lot of the bigger companies are doing M&A. They're actually merging with other shipping companies. This is a way to grow, rather than to ordering new vessels or buying new vessels on the second-hand market, which are extremely expensive these days. They're, growing in this way, growing like that. These are some examples of M&A transactions from the rest of the world, of course, which have happened over the last 12 months, or within 2024, actually. And we see some of the biggest companies in shipping. We see ADNOC merging or taking over Navigate. We see MSC with ground car carriers and the like. So there are huge transactions taking place, and it's because the market is so strong and there's so much liquidity around. And that just brings me to the end. As I said, Marine Money gathers data. That's our principal business. Okay, yeah, we call this a conference, and then we have the magazine, but at the end of the day, we gather data on shipping and shipping finance, market intelligence. We have a huge database on our website. If anybody's interested in having a look at what we have, or if anybody's interested in anything in particular, they can ask myself or Andrew, and we can sort of point them in the right direction. There's a lot of information there, and we look forward to continuing speaking to you all and getting even more information. Thank you very much.